Ever felt the ache of a double-edged sword of love and hate? I've endured it. Once bathed in trust and companionship, my life veered into turmoil when my partner whispered words of betrayal. "You're telling me that for the last year you have been cheating on me? You have been running around screwing some other guy? You're telling me that you've thrown away our marriage and our marriage vows just to get some strange..." The pain, raw and consuming, revealed a truth I couldn't ignore, leading me through a maze of passion and resentment. I love you now more than ever, maybe even more than before. But at the same time, I hate your guts. I hate you more than I have hated anything in my whole life. This is my story. Enjoy watching it. John got home from a long 12-hour day at work. He fixed big machines at the Caterpillar shop. He wasn't the boss there, but he was really good at his job. John didn't want to be the boss anyway. He liked fixing things. Lately, with so many forest fires around, there was a lot to do. Machines kept breaking down because of the fires. Since July, John worked a lot of extra hours. Now it was almost time for his kids to go back to school at the end of August. John woke up early and came back home late, every day, all summer. But John didn't mind. He liked working extra because it meant more money, and he needed the money. They had bought a big house 2 years ago. It had 4 bedrooms and a nice yard. It was in a good place for his family. His kids, Cindy, Joey, and Nancy, weren't small anymore. They each needed their own room. With all the fires, John was making good money. He was very tired, but happy. He was glad he could buy the big house. He felt proud. He loved his wife and kids a lot. He thought they were the best. Sure, they had some troubles like everyone else, but nothing too big. Susan had put on a bit of weight after having their 3 kids. Jonathan had grown a beer belly too. Susan often moaned about Jonathan not wanting to join the parties their friends or neighbors threw. He'd rather stay home or go fish. Their love life wasn't what either would call great. Jonathan wished for more, maybe spicier moments, while Susan wanted more cuddles and sweet talks from Jonathan. Just small stuff that bugged them, but never big enough to argue over. Jonathan felt okay, and so seemed Susan. When Jonathan stepped into the house, it was too quiet. Normally, the sound of their 3 kids playing would greet him. They shouldn't be asleep yet. It was early, and it was too late for them to be at a neighbor's house, even in summer. Jonathan paused, wondering if he missed something. Did Susan say they'd be at their grandparents' for a sleepover? Clearly, they weren't home. But Susan was there, sitting in a corner of the dining room table. Her hands were folded, and she looked at Jonathan with a mix of worry, sadness, and thought. For a second, Jonathan thought she might have cried. Her eyes looked red. "Jonathan, we need to talk," she said, her eyes moving from him to her hands. Jonathan's stomach twisted. He had seen that look from Susan just one time before. It was the same look and words she had when she told him his dad had suddenly died. That memory made Jonathan's knees weak. He pulled out a wooden chair and sat across from Susan, lost for words. He just looked at Susan, full of questions, but she wouldn't meet his gaze. Susan seemed lost in thought, her eyes far away. Jonathan felt she didn't want this talk. She wished to be anywhere else but here. She was torn. His stomach churned as he watched her hands, not once looking up at him. Finally, Susan spoke, her voice sad. "Jonathan, you know I love you, more than any other. You're everything to me. You know that, right?" Jonathan barely managed a nod, his throat too dry to speak. Susan looked into his eyes, searching for more than his brief answer. "It's crucial you believe that now, more than ever. There's stuff I need to say. It's vital you know how much I love you, what you mean to me, what we are to each other. Believe in us, please. Even if it hurts afterwards, it's really important. I truly love you." Her voice shook, every word heavy with meaning. Now Jonathan felt a chill, his hands trembling. He doubted his own thoughts and what Susan might say next. The air felt heavy, pushing him to think of sad times, like when his dad passed away. Those memories took over. Deep down, Jonathan sensed this was a turning point. Whatever Susan had to say, things would change forever. For a moment, time stopped. Susan was deep in thought, staring at Jonathan without really seeing him. Her gaze was lost, and only the clock's ticking filled the room. It was so quiet you could hear the house itself seem to groan under the weight of silence. Then, all at once, Susan began to speak. Her words tumbled out, sometimes so soft they were almost lost, other times loud, full of feeling. Her voice had a funny twist, her lips shook but didn't stop. "I'm scared you might hear this from someone else and get it wrong. I need to tell you, for me. I can't keep going this way." She had been holding on to something for more than a year now. It was time to let it out. Keeping it secret was painful, made everything feel wrong. "It's not fair to hide this. We're in a special time and I can't spoil it. We've gone over this too many times." She felt she had no choice but to tell him. If she didn't explain, how could he understand? "If you heard it from someone else, you'd think the worst. That would hurt us both," she said. "I hope you love me enough to understand. I have to do this. There's no other way." She let out a sigh, accepting whatever was to come. But then, silence took over again. Susan stopped talking and just looked lost, her body showing she was ready for whatever was next. The clock kept ticking. Once, twice, 3 times. Susan lifted her head, ready to speak, then hung it low and talked. No sound at first. Then, with effort, as if each word was hard to say. "Jonathan, this last year I've been with someone, a man." Her eyes now drilled into Jonathan's, waiting for his response, but also bold, ready to argue. She was set to talk about her cheating openly and honestly with Jonathan, taking her first step. Now hiding was not an option. "Jonathan is a very good, kind, caring, soft man who got hurt a lot and needs my love, care, and time. The year before I met him, his wife died in a crash. She died when their car flipped on the highway. He was driving. And even though it wasn't his fault, he still felt very guilty. He was very sad, thinking of ending his life. Even now, after so much time and all my care, he still gets sad sometimes." Jonathan felt sick. Had he understood her right? She was unfaithful to him. She had tricked and made a fool of him. He felt like he was knocked down by a punch and was so shocked that he couldn't even feel the hurt. His mouth felt dry and sticky, still not getting the full meaning of Susan's words. "You're saying that for the last year you've been cheating on me? You've been with another guy. You're saying you've thrown our marriage away, our promises, just for some excitement. You're saying you don't care about the kids or me? You just want your fun and thrills." Susan's eyes sparked, her face got stern, and her voice loud and angry. "Jonathan, shame on you! Do you think so bad of me? Do you love me so little to think I am a bad woman, a shameful woman in the streets? Now I'm so ashamed of you to think you could care and love me so little. Now I am so let down. I can't believe you'd think that of me, your wife and the mom to our kids. You're meant to love, keep, and care for me. Remember our vows, Jonathan?" Susan's words hit hard, like she wanted to shake him awake. Then she turned away, trying to find her calm again. Silence hung in the air, but in Susan's eyes, there was still love and thought. A soft sigh broke the quiet. "Jonathan, he's not a bad guy, really. This isn't what you're scared it is. It's not just about being with someone else. It's not about cheating or hurting you. It's not about doing wrong. It's about caring, a lot. It's about me giving something to someone who really needs it, and getting something back that means everything to me. Something to keep in my heart, for when I'm old and not wanted anymore. Yes, there's that part, and it's good." She smiled gently, lost in thought. "It's more than that. It's because there's real love. That's why it's so special." But Jonathan crumbled, feeling like he'd been hit hard. All he could think was that Susan loved this other man. She was going to leave him. Was she packing already or packing his things? Tears filled his eyes and he bent over, so hurt he could hardly look at Susan. "You love him?" That was all he could get out. His voice let out his heart's hurt, showing in the way he moved. The look in his eyes spoke loud. Susan knew this was why she had to make this hard choice, thinking. She knew Jonathan would get it all wrong, would react wrong. But still, Susan spoke true and with pride. "Yes, I do love him. A lot. He's big in my life. He matters a lot to me." Then, with the softest, kindest voice she could find. "But I love you too. I've never stopped, and I never will stop loving you. I love you both, each in a different way for different things," staring hard and deep into Jonathan's eyes, hoping. Needing him to get it, she went on. "I won't leave you for him or anyone else. Jonathan, don't ever think that. You are my husband, the dad of our kids, and the love of my life. My true match. Then, with a sad sigh, looking out the window into the far away. Someday I know it'll end with him and me. He's too young for me to think of as a partner. In time, he'll move on from needing me and find his true match and mate. Then I'll just keep our times as memories, breathing hard. Now, anger starting to show in him. Who is he? Where is this guy? Jonathan got up from his chair, walking back and forth between the kitchen and the dining room. Her face and eyes, cold, so cold, hard, and unfeeling. Jonathan, who he is doesn't matter to you. What we do, how we love, or when we love. What we do together isn't your thing, it's just him and me. You're not in what happens with us. What happens with us is just him and me. You're not part of that, just like he's not part of our life together. Never ask me such things again, I won't tell you. Jonathan hit the wall hard, making cracks in it. How could you think I'd be okay with this? Are you out of your mind? Do you really want me to be okay with sharing you with him? He yelled, looking at her face turn from cold to a teasing grin. What will you do, Jonathan? Leave me? I don't see that happening. You know what splitting up means for you, right? You might want to talk to a lawyer before saying more foolish things. We're in a place where it doesn't matter who's at fault for our mess, she said, knowing too well how it ends, since he's a lawyer himself. We've talked this over. Leave me now and you'll regret it. I'll make sure of it. I come first, then the kids, not you. You'll be paying for the kids, for me, court stuff, my car, and this house. Even with all the extra work you've been doing, you'll barely have enough for yourself. You'll end up living in your car or crashing at work, eating the cheapest stuff. For years, she said, her face softening a bit, but still tough. She leaned in, challenging him across the table. Did you think about the kids? How does leaving fit with them in mind? Do you know how much it would hurt them, you not being around? She leaned back, arms crossed, a smirk on her face. No, Jonathan. Leaving isn't a choice. Jonathan, shocked by how Susan had cornered him, realized he had to find some way to win a point against her. With a mean grin, he said, What if I cheated on you? That'd be okay, right? What's good for one is good for the other. She glared at him, fired up. Her reply came fast, too fast. Don't be dumb, Jonathan. Look at yourself. You're not young anymore. Your hair is thinning, your belly sticks out. You're a middle-aged man with 3 kids and a wife to care for. Who would want an affair or a fling with you? Women our age want honesty, warmth, and safety. Or they want thrilling fun and romance. You can't give them that. No, Jonathan. If you run around and make me look bad, I'll leave you. They just stared at each other, mad. Then Susan looked away first. She stared out the window, lost in thought. The room was quiet except for the clock and Jonathan's rough breathing. Slowly, she looked at him again, but this time her look was soft and kind. Jonathan was caught off guard. His feelings shifted because of her change. Jonathan, it doesn't have to be like this. I still love you the same. He hasn't taken anything from us. I'm here for you always. She kept talking. If you really love me, what happened with him shouldn't ruin our love. Maybe with time, our love can even grow stronger and better because of this. It's all up to you now. I'm still open to you, still here for you. I'm trying not to let our bridge fall. I'm even trying to fix old and new ones. She sighed deep. She looked down from Jonathan to her hands, joined again, resting on the table. I hoped, if you loved me enough, you'd be happy for me. Tears started in her eyes. She looked back to Jonathan's eyes, her look almost asking, pleading. I don't know what more to say. I thought your love would be strong enough to see past your pride and want what's best for me. I'm sorry if you can't. Really sorry, she cried, covering her mouth with her hand. She got up quickly, running from the dining room down the hall to the bedroom. The door slammed shut. Jonathan walked stiffly to the kitchen, got a bottle of Jim Beam from a cabinet, and came back to the dining room. He lifted the bottle and drank, the liquor going down his throat in 3 big gulps. Sitting back down, he stared at the chair Susan had been in, lifting the open bottle. Here's to my loving wife. Here's to my loving, cheating witch of a wife. Then, with the bottle to his lips, he took another 3 big gulps of whiskey. Jonathan didn't usually drink angry, but tonight was not usual, was it? The more he drank, the angrier and more sad he became. Quiet Jonathan was now loud. Anger and drink made him shout, becoming mean with his words. Jonathan got up, staggering and hitting the walls. He made his way to the bedroom door. It was locked. He hit the door with his hand. "Darn it, Susan. You cheat and lock me out of my own bedroom. I can't even be a man in my own house. You cheating on me, and you lock me out? What's next? You gonna be with him in our bed? Is he gonna sleep there now? In my spot? Is that what you plan, or did it already happen?" Jonathan walked back to the dining room, calling out, "Susan, you're no good. I wish I never married you." About 30 minutes later, Susan came out of the bedroom. She was dressed and had a bag of clothes with her, planning to leave without stopping. But she paused, looking at Jonathan with pity. He was drunk, head on the table next to an almost empty bottle of whiskey. She then turned to leave. Jonathan looked up. "Going to your lover?" At first, Susan didn't reply. Then as she opened the door, she said, "Yes, Jonathan, I'm going to him tonight. You're so mad and drunk. I'm scared of what you might do. You've said enough harsh words. If I hear more, I'll start to hate you. I hope tomorrow you think differently, and we can talk." Jonathan slept a bit, then woke, drinking more. He fell asleep again. Later at night, he woke up feeling less drunk, stumbled into the bedroom, and sat on the bed feeling very alone. The weight of what happened hit him. He cried hard, the kind of crying that doesn't seem to stop. The next day, Jonathan woke up with a bad headache and couldn't think of working. He never does this, but he called his boss. Not to ask, but to tell. He was going to use all his sick days and even take a week off. When his boss got mad, Jonathan didn't care. "Fire me," he said, and hung up while his boss was still talking. He muttered to himself, it didn't matter. If not this job, then another one. He walked around his empty house, knowing he should be doing something. He should be finding out the truth, not just believing what Susan had said. How do I even start to find a lawyer? He thought. Knowing my luck, I'd call the guy she's with. So he looked for a woman lawyer in the phone book, thinking that would avoid calling the wrong person. But staring at the phone, he hesitated. Calling felt like he was giving up on everything. The house, his marriage, his dreams for the future. His mind wandered. This can't be real. Not to me, he thought. There must be a simple reason for all this, something that makes sense. He wished he could erase the last day, forget everything. He wondered if it would have been better not to know. Maybe things could have stayed the same. Would it be so bad if I didn't know? He thought. Then clear memories hit him, like the day in the hospital when he held his newborn child for the first time. What went wrong? Where did it all fall apart? Why am I here now? Where did those times go? He thought back to other days, their first date, when he had just come back from serving. She had just finished high school and started her first job. Then there was the day he took her fishing and they ended up skinny dipping in the cold water of a rocky stream. Their first time together. Was there something I could do? Should have done? What to do now? Is holding on to what's left okay? Can we have times like those again after everything? If I don't say yes to the divorce, am I stopping those times from ever coming back? What's next for me? What kind of future can I have? Do I even want that future? Or should I just accept things? He reached for the phone. He thought, no matter what, I need to know. I can't let what happened yesterday happen again. With a mix of feelings, he decided, I'll call and ask for advice. No need to rush any choice. He set up a meeting for the next morning. They told him to bring all his money stuff, like tax papers. Then he took some pain pills and got in the shower, letting the warm water wash over him until his headache started to fade. When he came out and got dressed, he saw the voicemail light blinking. Someone had called while he was lost in thought and showering. He didn't even hear the phone. Jonathan, it's me. I'm at my folks' place, taking the kids. We're going to my sister's for a bit. This gives us some time to think. I only told my parents we had a big fight. No need to drag anyone else into this. We both said really bad things last night, things we shouldn't have said, or at least not like that. Please trust me, it's not as bad as you think. I really do love you. We can make it through if we want. I'm sorry for being so harsh last night. I didn't mean to. I was just too scared. Suddenly, the tape ended. He spent his day looking for money records, thinking hard about how one can love two people at once. He couldn't wrap his head around it. He knew he loved people in different ways. Friends, family, wife, kids, mom and dad. But loving two people in the same way at the same time? Am I missing something? Could she be right in some way? Is this something rare and special? Am I being too hard on her? Does she love me? Or him too? Or is it just a crush on him? For the feelings, the fun, and the life he gives her, that I can't? Thinking this hurt. Bad. She had a life away from him, a life he knew nothing about, a life he couldn't give. After the hurt and fear came hate and anger, then doubt. Why? Where did I go wrong? How did I let us down? He remembered her saying he had changed. He didn't feel changed. But then, he did. Standing in front of his mirror, he wondered when these changes happened. Why didn't I see them? His thoughts got dark. I have changed. I'm not the man she married. We've been holding on to the past for how long? I was the first to drift away. I left her first before she left me. Does she love him? Because he's who I used to be. She loves him as a substitute. Is that it? Do I have to win her back from him? Is that what this is all about then? In anger? Do I want her back? Why am I always the one to blame? Damn it. He thought a lot about her, the woman he married, but didn't feel the same about anymore. She broke his trust. He didn't make her do it. He was the one feeling hurt. His mind went to dark places, thinking of her with someone else. She said their times together were good, making him wonder, was that guy better than him? Did they try things she never did with him? Was it a different style they had? Jealousy hurt, but it also made him feel a weird, twisted want. He felt sick but couldn't help wanting to know more about what they did together. He tried to shake it off, wanting to feel just angry like before. He felt she wronged him. Her lover did too. He felt he was right in this. But inside, he kept questioning himself. Susan drove to the mountains with the kids silent, excited to see Aunt Jenny and Uncle Joe. Jenny and Joe's place was far from others, filled with animals and close to nature. Their house by the stream was perfect for adventures, even though they couldn't have kids. They loved when the family visited. They worked online, so they had the time. Susan knew that once there, the kids would be taken care of and happy. She'd also have time away from Jonathan and Rich to think. After sleeping on it, she really regretted how she talked with Jonathan. She felt ashamed for playing a part in the hurt. She didn't mean to say things the way she did. Her talk didn't go as planned. Nothing she said came out right or was taken the way she meant. She let her emotions get the best of her and replied to his anger with her own. She hurt him on purpose when she didn't want or need to. She planned to keep quiet about her thing with Rich, only saying it was about sex. But she ended up talking first about their intimacy. She hurt him more than needed, maybe too much to fix. That was a mistake. A big mistake. Driving up the winding road, her thoughts shifted to her mixed feelings about being with both men. She knew it was wrong to be with two men, but it felt so right. Only at first with Rich did she feel guilty for being with someone not her husband. She felt naughty like when she was a teen. Now that feeling was gone. It's like she had two husbands. With Rich, everything was free and wild. They tried anything, things she wouldn't do with Jonathan because she wasn't really Rich's wife. Their relationship felt free from her past rules. She didn't feel she had to be the perfect wife or mom. She found it easy to share her deepest desires with him, stuff she'd never dare tell her husband. But the thrill wasn't just about the sex. Often, when they were together, the images of both men would mix in her mind. She'd be with her husband in her thoughts while being with her lover, and the other way around. She wished she could merge the best parts of both men into one. Jonathan was like a rock, always there, strong and reliable, while Rich was soft, full of kindness, always ready to listen and understand. At first, guilt ate at her, leading her to end things twice, only to return after Rich tried to harm himself. Then, bumping into him by chance when out shopping and seeing him so down, she couldn't stay away. Their affair wasn't planned. They met at a party her husband skipped. Their first connection was just talking. She saw his sadness and listened to his story. Those talks seemed to lift his spirits. He said she made him feel better, like he mattered. That made her feel important, more than just a mom and wife. That's how it started. First, just phone calls, then meeting up while her husband was at work and kids at school. It stayed non-sexual for a while. They had become really close friends, sharing their dreams, fears, and issues. Before the crash, he was a paralegal. He got a lot of money from the car maker's insurance after the accident because he had to stay in the hospital for so long. He stopped trying to work because of what they talked about. But she convinced him to go back to school and study law. Bit by bit, they went from talking on the phone and having lunch together to her visiting him at his place. At first, she just wanted to make him a homemade meal. Their relationship didn't seem to change much after she cooked for him at his house. But she began visiting him more, going straight to his place instead of meeting in town. Soon, she started acting like she was the lady of the house, organizing his messy home. This made them closer, even though she didn't realize she was treating him like she did her husband. Their friendship got too complicated. They often talked about love and their secret wants. They shared stories about their wild and fun pasts. This made the air between them thick with want. Then one day, after a kiss in the kitchen, they couldn't hold back anymore and rushed to his bedroom, leaving their lunch behind. After she quickly left his house, went home and took a long shower, crying and trying to wash away what had happened. When he tried to call her later, she didn't pick up. She kept away, dodging places he might be. Guilt ate at her, making her promise to herself it would stay her hidden wrong, her secret alone. But a week later, hearing he was in the hospital for taking too many sleep pills, feeling guilty for having a part in it, she visited. They held hands, quietly saying no more closeness. Yet that was a promise they couldn't keep. Guilt rode them hard. They slipped back into love and regret soon after saying no more. She lost hope of ever leaving him for a normal life, accepting their tangled love's end. Now, walking in the forest near her sisters, hearing her kids laugh, she cried. She wished she could tell Jonathan her deep thoughts and feelings. She longed for her solid, stable husband's help. Trapped by her choices, she saw no way out. She had hoped they could talk as husband and wife, find a way through. She was ready to explain her thoughts, her feelings, but he wasn't. He only saw the result. That was all to him. Everything to him was that she was with another man. She was marked. She was wrong. Why couldn't he see it was not about the sex? Sex was a show of feeling, a sharing of closeness. Their times together were shaped by their feelings, their wants for each other. Of course, she was different with Rich than with him. Their feelings for each other were not the same as hers and her husband's. She couldn't act the same with her husband because each relationship was different for her. They shared different kinds of closeness, ways of talking and understanding. Each one was unique and could not be compared. Talking about physical acts of love as if they were the same was rude and unfair to all. Their discussion had turned sour. He became mad and demanding. She lost her cool, which she regretted since she wanted to clear the air. But he never asked why. He didn't seem to care to know or understand how things could have gone wrong between them. This made her mad the most. So she hurt him deeply, knowing where it would hit him hardest. It was a mistake, and what followed only made things worse. How could she fix the mistakes she had already made? Jonathan sat with his hands together, looking over a big wooden desk at the older lady with gray hair reading his paperwork. He wanted to burst out and share everything, but her presence made him wait. After she finished reading, she put the papers down and looked at him over her glasses. "So, why are you here? What made you decide to divorce your wife? You don't look good. Are you okay? Do you need help?" he asked. "Not yesterday, but the day before. My wife told me she's seeing someone else. Has been for a while. It's hard to explain. I'm still trying to wrap my head around it. This is all new to me. I'm lost. I don't know what to do. You're here to find out what you can do. Do you think fixing things is out of the picture?" Her eyes asked him, waiting for his answer. Yeah, I need to see what I can do. And no, I don't know if we can fix things. She says she loves me and doesn't want to go. But she doesn't want to leave him either. It just feels off. It feels so wrong. She can't love us both. I need to know what I can do." He then shared what his wife had told him about how things would go if they split. The lawyer laughed a little, shook her head and frowned as he talked, letting him finish without cutting him off. "Some of what she told you holds some truth. We're in a place where the why behind the split doesn't matter unless you can show she's done something very bad. Like using drugs, has a dangerous love life, or is not a good mom. Can you?" She looked at him, seeing him shake his head no to her question. "Then the kids would stay with her, but you'd both be in charge. She can't and shouldn't cut your time with them. It's better for her and the kids if you're there as much as possible. All things owned get split between you two, unless you can show money came from family or like that. Everything gets halved. The house, your work retirement plan, cars, and what's in the bank. Everything but stuff that's just yours. Then, taking a breath, you've been working a lot, extra hours, and this could work against you in a split. The court will look at what you've made before to figure out how much you give for the kids and maybe for her too. Since she hasn't been working and has 3 little kids, the court will likely not make her work until the kids grow up more. You'd have to pay her money to help her live. You won't be homeless, but money will be tight. Your income won't stretch far for 2 homes, and everyone will feel it. Not just you, but her and the kids too, she said, giving him a long look. You could try to sue the man she's with for breaking up your marriage. But if you don't know who he is, and now that it's all out in the open, proving it will be tough. You can't just spy on them. If she only sees him at his place, that's not enough. And anything you find out without them knowing is spying, and you can't use it in court, not if they keep it private. It's hard, she sighed, to do much. Maybe, but she'd have to agree to speak in court. I'd say don't go down that road. She then sighed deeply again. Honestly, I wouldn't suggest getting a divorce unless you really have to. Mr. Fremont, trying counseling with your wife first would be better. She looked at the papers for his wife's name, then lost her cool for a second. Susan Fremont, she breathed out. Looking back at the forms, she wrote down the address and phone number, then pulled out her phone. She looked lost as she scrolled. Then her face changed. She looked at him. Mr. Fremont, we had no idea she was married. I'm sorry, but this isn't going to work. I can't help you. It's about keeping things secret. I'm really sorry. She was clearly upset by what she found out. He was on the edge of his seat, full of questions. You know her, right? He worked here, didn't he? Who is he? Where is he? He was trying to keep it together, but it was tough. She kept her cool and replied, No, he doesn't work here anymore. He was a paralegal. We all knew his wife. Her death hit us hard. I've met Susan, your wife, a few times. Jonathan, I can't talk to you as a lawyer. What I'm saying is just from someone who cares. It was a surprise to learn she was married. They looked perfect together. She was good for him. We were all rooting for them. She sighed. This doesn't feel right. I know him well. He's not one to chase after married women. I'm usually right about people. Susan wouldn't take her vows lightly. There's more to this story than we know. She stood up, walked over, and gently touched his shoulder. I know this is a lot for you, and it hurts, but think about all your choices. Look for the truth before you do anything. Consider everyone involved. She handed him her card. My private number is on here. Call me if you need to talk. If you'd rather not talk to me, I know a great therapist. As he walked out, his thoughts started to clear. No solid answers came, but he was beginning to see that maybe there wasn't a perfect answer. This mess his wife made means he has to decide. What's worth fighting for? Where can he make peace? What can he let go? Realizing his biggest mistake was letting go of his life's reins, hoping others would make him happy. No, it wasn't about losing control. He had handed it over, waiting for others to fill his needs. He had let life glide by, waiting for Susan to fill it with joy. Yes, he worked hard, but only chased goals set by others. He never dreamed up his own aims. In doing this, he grew lazy in some ways. He had a job, a house, a wife, and kids, but his own life was missing. His only joys were now fishing, sipping beer, and TV. Even his old love for fixing cars had faded. He only touched cars to mend them when needed. Since his teen years, all his old pals had drifted away. He hadn't noticed. He let himself slide, and she had pointed it out right. He was putting on weight, becoming a mess. And if they split up, what would happen then? How would he guard his stuff and himself? What kind of life would await him? Where were his dreams, his core principles? He saw he had to put himself first again. Let whatever happens, happen. But thinking of Susan, he knew he couldn't handle that now. She was too big of a mystery, an obstacle. It was better to push their issues to the side and tackle stuff he could handle, adding her to his plans only when she might clash or get along with his plans. Taking his first step towards a new start, he went to his boss and made it clear. No more extra hours and only work at the Caterpillar shop 4 days a week, especially if divorce was coming. This way, he'd make less money. Later on, he could try to earn more if needed. He decided to spend more time on himself and his hobbies. First, he went to the bank, took out all the money from his 401k and their joint savings. Then he went to another bank to open new accounts just for him. The joint account stayed for both to pay bills and living costs. He made sure all his money first went into his own accounts. They had just one credit card, so he called to get two from it. One just for him with the same old limit, and another for both but only with $600 to use. He knew she could take half of everything they had, but he wanted to make the most out of his share first. So, when Susan got home the next day, she didn't see his old truck. Instead, there was a shiny, new, big silver Dodge Ram in the driveway. The kids thought it belonged to a visitor and ran inside, yelling about the cool truck. Susan was left alone, confused, with the new truck outside and hammer sounds from the basement. She dropped her bag in the living room, walked to the dining room, sat down, and waited. Soon, Cindy, their oldest, came back up and told her, "Dad's fixing the basement. He's making a party room and an extra bedroom and bathroom. He's already put up the walls." She tugged at her mom's hand, eager and pulling her up. "Come see, Mom. It's cool." Downstairs, Jonathan was sitting amid building stuff in the new fun room. Joey and Nancy were next to him, all smiles and laughs. He was all bright-eyed and full of grins until he saw her. Then his smile faded and his eyes went cold. Feeling shy, she looked away and walked past, eyeing the bathroom and other rooms. Then she heard words that made her stop and think. They both looked at the rooms, feeling things they couldn't say out loud. "Jonathan, it doesn't have to be like this," she barely whispered. Nancy ran up, asking if she could sleep there too sometimes. Her dad hugged her tight, happy. Jonathan spent all day and evening working in the basement, only going up when he had to. After the kids were asleep, Susan went down, finding him among his plans. They looked at each other, silent. She wished he would ask her something important, but they both stayed quiet, lost in their thoughts. Why? She still had hope he'd want to get why breaking from thinking about his wife. Jonathan looked around the party room at the piles of wood, tools, and things all over the floor. His mind wandered to the new truck parked outside the garage. "You were right, Susan. I let myself go, but also, I made a big mistake by giving you my future, my joy." He sighed deeply, dropping his head. "No, maybe it wasn't giving trust. Maybe it was just being lazy. I'm not sure now." He lifted his head up, his eyes cold and fixed on her. But there's one thing he was sure of. He waved his hand and then pointed at himself. "If this has shown me anything, it's that from now on I'm putting myself first." Holding up 2 fingers in front of her face, he looked slowly. Anger grew inside him. "Right now, I've got only 2 things I care about, and neither is you. The first is me. The other, the kids." Susan winced and pulled back from his words and the fingers he waved so close to her face, letting his hand drop and turning from her. The vision of her with another, dragging his thoughts to dark places. He let his shoulders drop in pain. "Right now, nothing else matters," he sighed more to himself, trying to shake the vision of her with her lover, her loud passion he had never seen. He lifted his head. "What you did to me the other night and what you've been doing, I can't forgive. Maybe I partly caused what happened, but it doesn't make your wrongs okay." Turning to her, his eyes now hard and cold. "No matter what, you had no right to hurt me like that." Susan stood silent, her head down, her eyes on the floor. Neither he nor anyone else there could tell what she felt. She waited, letting him talk and get all his feelings out. She knew now was not the time to speak. He was too mad. This was his chance to let it all out. Maybe when he was done being mad, they could have a calm talk. She told herself she wouldn't repeat the mistake of that one night. He walked back and forth in front of her, talking about what had been bothering him and what he planned to do. "You told me lies about divorce," he said. "If your lawyer friend was as smart as you think, he would have known better." She felt a shock at his angry look and his knowing about her affair. Not sure what he knew. "You'll hurt just as much or more," he said. And then he added that he could cause trouble for her son if he wanted. Jonathan's smile let her know he was enjoying making her worry about what he knew. "But I won't do that," he said. "I care about the kids." He stopped walking and looked at her. "I won't let you and him run my life or take away my time with my kids." He pointed to the floor. "I'm staying right here, like it or not. Then, without looking for her reaction, he went on. You changed our marriage rules without asking me. You decided you didn't need us to agree on big things anymore. He paused to look at her, then kept going. Okay. You think I don't own you or what you do? Well, I say the same. I don't want to talk about what I'll do next. That part of us is gone. Now, it's just about the kids, nothing more. I don't care about your new love, because you're not mine now. Susan was hit hard by how angry he was. She gasped, shocked. Jonathan, don't say you don't love me enough for this to change us so deeply. I love you. It doesn't have to end like this. She wished she hadn't spoken. She knew love made her say things she shouldn't. Turning, he looked hurt. Do you get how thin the line is between love and hate? He broke down, his hands shaking, dropping to sit on the wallboard where he had been happy with their kids just hours ago, trying not to cry. He hid his face from her. I love you now. Maybe even more than before, but I also hate you more than anything else in my life. He looked up, tears in his eyes, pain and anger on his face. I hate you for what you did to me. Susan stood there, hands over her ears, shocked, then ran upstairs crying. He lay on the wallboard, curled up, images of her and her lover in his head, more vivid than any movie. He whispered, Susan, why? I love you. Why? She ran to her room, threw herself on the bed, crying, curled up. Her pain from his words burned her like acid in her belly. She kept her hands on her ears. But his I hate you kept echoing in her head, his angry face haunting her. As he spoke, those words stuck in her head. Now she felt deep down from his actions and words that he never really loved her. He didn't care to ask her why. To him, why didn't count. Only what did. Did he ever love her? Or did he just love having her around? Was she just something he owned, and now that another man had touched her, she was like broken stuff to him? Was that all she meant to him? For him, things were simple. No middle ground, no mix of color, no hard questions, just yes or no. His or hers, nothing in between. She cried herself to sleep, feeling sure he never loved her and never would. She guessed she let herself be close to Rich, her other man, because deep down she knew Jonathan didn't love her for real. Their marriage felt more like a deal than love. He never showed her real love. Days, then weeks passed. Jonathan fixed up the basement and moved down there with the kids. With less work, he spent more time with them. He took them to fun parks, got a big camping truck, and went camping. He made sure Susan wasn't included. If she asked to come, he'd ignore her or make her feel unwanted. Even the kids began to notice how odd he was with her. They became quiet and nervous around both of them. When she tried to talk to him, he walked away, refusing to discuss it. The few times he said anything were just sharp digs. One night after the kids were asleep, she asked him to stay and talk. She was in a bad mood all day. They sat at the kitchen table again. Jonathan, we're done. He didn't want to mess us up anymore. He's leaving. It's over. Jonathan laughed in a mean way. So? He thinks that's going to fix things? She jerked back from his harsh words. Weeks went by and nothing got better. Only his mad turned to sour. He got up and asked, That it then? Susan looked at her hands a long time before she looked up, wondering, Is that all we got to say? Are we that messed up? He just walked away down to his room. Sitting there, he felt mad, wanting to make her feel bad. Again, he thought, so? Life went on, but Susan got quiet, thinking hard. Time passed. Christmas and New Year's came and went. That Christmas felt extra cold, not just the snow or wind outside. Little Nancy felt it first, getting mad or hiding away. She stuck to her brother, and maybe that's why he started acting older than he was. Lastly, Cindy, the eldest, began to stay out, getting busy with school and friends. So one day, Jonathan came home to find Susan at the kitchen table, kids gone again. Jonathan, we need to talk, she said, looking real sad. She pushed a big brown envelope across the table. I filed for divorce. Jonathan stared at the envelope, made a noise, nodded, and went back to his room in the basement. He locked the door, sat on his bed, and hung his head, almost crying. He felt too many things and was mostly scared. He wasn't scared of the end of his marriage 6 months ago when she said she'd been with someone else for a year. And it wasn't just for fun. No. What really scared him was how he'd go on after losing his kids. He thought he had a good life, like those perfect family pictures his mom loved. But now, his life felt like one of those kids' pictures where scary things hide in what looks normal. Everything was so different from what he thought. Susan changed, like on TV when someone pulls off a mask to show a different face. When Susan told him about her other person, his world fell apart. He lost everything he thought he had, except his kids. He always thought if you worked hard and put your family first, you'd get a nice life with a family and a cozy home. He thought he had all that. Now, Susan was taking it all away. He didn't care about the house. He was okay with losing Susan. But what was his life without his kids? They were the most important thing. What happened to him didn't matter. It was all for the kids. Losing Susan was okay, like getting rid of a bad thing. But losing the kids would make him like a fancy car that doesn't run. Nice to look at, but not good for anything. When she told him about what would happen to the kids, his heart went cold. Real cold. For a short bit, he thought about getting DNA tests. A friend, a bit drunk, said maybe if they weren't really his kids just for a second. He thought maybe it would be less painful to lose them if they weren't his. But deep down, he knew it didn't matter where they came from. They were his kids, and he wouldn't do anything that might hurt them or make them doubt his love. He never wanted them to go looking for another dad. These last 6 months were super tough and yet kind of great. Seeing Susan going off with that other guy, it hurt him a lot. Like a turtle stuck with a sharp fish in its shell, it felt like a huge hit to his pride. He never really got the idea of deep hate, the kind that sticks around forever, until these past few months. But being with his kids, that was like medicine. Even though Jonathan kept calling himself a coward for letting Susan and her guy off easy, being with his kids made him stick to what he believed in. A real man puts his family first. That's what Jonathan always tried to do in his marriage. He wasn't one for big words. He didn't know how to say things the way Susan liked, with fancy words like her lawyer guy did. But Jonathan believed actions spoke louder than words. He worked like crazy, lots of extra hours to take care of his family. Then some lawyer lady told him those extra hours might make him pay more alimony. She told him to check how much extra he was working. He spent so much time looking through his pay history. He found out that in the last 6 years, the records his boss could show him had only 3 weeks, not counting holidays, where he worked less than 60 hours. One was because of a car crash. Someone talking on their phone had hit him, sending Jonathan to the hospital with 2 broken ribs and a lung that wouldn't fill up right. It had hurt a lot, but he left the hospital early and went back to work. They needed the cash to pay for the land for this house. The second time, he was too sick to work. He usually ignored colds or the flu, but his boss caught him this time. After working with a fever of 101 for 3 days, his boss made him go home. He also got told off for being tough and getting others sick. The third time was when his dad passed away. He almost cut off his finger that week because he couldn't see through his sweat, yet he only took the fewest days off needed to be there for his dad's funeral. Jonathan laughed to himself when he recalled what Susan had shouted during one of their fights about her cheating. She said he loved his job more than his family, that he used work to avoid them. What a laugh. Jonathan never really loved his job. It was always too hot, sweaty and dirty in the summer, and cold yet still sweaty and grimy in the winter. It wasn't boring, but wasn't fun either. He did take pride in doing it well. He was really good at it. But he didn't enjoy working on cars in his free time. It was just something he did to provide for his family. He knew he wasn't the best with school stuff. Maybe he could have finished at a low-ranked college. But that kind of school and the grades he'd get wouldn't help him make the money he did, working in the UN. Air-conditioned heavy machinery shop was his place in the hot Austin summers. Once he thought about selling stuff. Sales guys would call him to help seal a deal. The way they talked seemed magic. Jonathan would just watch, knowing it was not for him, so he worked extra hours instead. This way he earned more than lots of office bosses. Looking at his hands, at all the tiny marks from years of hard work, fixing huge machines, he sighed. Life wasn't meant to be easy, but you do what you must for your family. That's true love, doing what's needed, not what's wanted. Jonathan rested his face in his hands, trying hard not to cry again. Only once had he cried, but now tears came easily, a sign of the deep hurt within. He couldn't forget the harsh words Susan used that night, shattering his world. "If we split now, Jonathan, I'll take everything," she'd said. "I'll protect the kids. And me. Your well-being won't matter to me. You'll give me child support and money for me. The court, my car, and this house. Even with all your overtime, you'll barely have enough for a cardboard box to live in. You'd end up sleeping in your car or at work, living off cheap meals. If it was just that, I'd have left her that week. But she threatened me about the kids. The lawyer I saw said the same. I've seen enough guys with shared custody to know it means nothing much. The ex-wife might pretend to agree, or even want to, but deep down, she'd prefer a full family with a new man, acting like the old one's gone. No matter what the judge said or what she told him, it didn't take long for her to make it tough to see the kids. She had all the right reasons, she said, but it ended up with the kids thinking their dad didn't want them. He once trusted the Susan he married, but now saw she could turn into a real monster, pushing him away. She said her lawyer friend left her to not hurt the family, but once divorced, she planned to get him back. She was still good-looking. Didn't he read somewhere that even the devil was pretty? Well, Susan could teach the devil a thing or two. Jonathan sighed. He tried his best to deal with this crazy mess. He wanted to put himself first, but couldn't. His kids' happiness meant everything, and he felt he failed them, too. He remembered an article Susan left out. It said it was better for kids if a parent died than if parents split up. Without thinking, Jonathan reached under his bed for the gun he kept there. He took off the safety and put the gun in his mouth. The cold metal felt odd. The sound of the hammer hitting nothing threw him back. It was like being on strong meds again. His head was a mess. It took ages to get what he just tried to do. Jonathan thought, I can't even do this right. Someone had taken the bullets. Suddenly he shivered, full of adrenaline. He nearly ended it all. How did it come to this? He thought about taking the easy way out. He remembered the last time his dad had hit him with a belt. He had run from a fight at school because he was scared of getting hurt. His dad had said a man is a bully if he looks for a fight. He's dumb if he stays in an unfair fight. But he's also a coward if he runs from a fair one, and a fool for listening to his fear. Fear hurts you more in the long run than any hit or scrap you'd get at school. Some guys never get this. Some mess up their lives before they figure it out. You're going to get it now. This will hurt you more than if you had been hit today. Next time, think. Weigh the cost. But don't listen to the scared voice inside. Jonathan had never sought out fights. But he learned if you didn't run from them, they came less often. He had to actually fight. Looking at the gun in his hand, he wondered why it wasn't ready. The gun was for safety. What's the use of an unloaded gun as he loaded it? He thought maybe kids are better off with a gone than a split parent, but not with a gone scared one. If anyone should take a bullet, it should be Susan or her new guy. She's the one. Just then, the phone rang. Daddy, did you forget you said you'd help me with my photos? I told Mom I needed you today if I want to get on the softball travel team, but she said you two needed to talk alone. Daddy, please come get me. This is big. If I don't get on the team this year, I'll never make it to high school. Jonathan's body still shook from the rush, sitting in silence. A part of him wondered if he could talk clearly. Could he even say a simple hello? Daddy, this is big. I've been trying to call your cell since Mom left us here. Guess you forgot it again. Please, if you won't come to Gramps, I'll ask her to bring me home. Daddy, I really need you. This is big. John's head was full of loud, mixed-up thoughts, all spinning around one big idea. Someone has to go. If not him, then Susan or her. Someone, but not just anyone. A small voice cried out that his kids still needed him, no matter how small his part in their lives. If he took someone else out, it would be like he left his kids just as much as if he had done himself in. If I had gone, what would have become of my girls? What kind of man would they see me as? What kind of men would they end up with? As he shook his head to try to clear it, something in Cindy's voice got through. Was it fear? His girl was in trouble. What kind of man just sits in his sadness when his daughter needs him? The loud voice in his head said, "A man looks after his family no matter the cost." That was what John believed deep down. As Cindy kept talking, his mind started to pull back from the dark, trying to shake off the mess in his head. He shook his head. He didn't remember saying he'd help Cindy with her softball. It sounded like him. But last night softball didn't seem big to her. John sighed again. Not knowing how big sports were to his 14-year-old girl was another mark of his failing as a dad. Just another proof of his fall in everything that meant a lot to him. "Daddy, you're freaking me out. Talk to me. Daddy, I need you. Daddy, please." John's eyes blinked, and even though his body still shook and the dark called, Cindy's voice held him back like a climber's safety rope. "I'm sorry, kiddo. I spaced out for a sec. I'll be there to take you to softball in a bit. What time does it kick off? Where are you, Dad? Back home yet? Did you see Mom? Did you guys chat? Did she share with you?" Her questions were quick and odd. All his kids had Susan's smarts, not his. He was happy about that. But man, was it tough to keep up with their fast jump from one thought to the next, trying to catch what she meant. "I'm okay," he said. "Just spaced out for a bit. I'm on my way to you now. We'll be there in less than 30 minutes. We'll chat then." He didn't like talking over these tiny phones. It took him more than 30 minutes to gather himself before driving to his daughter. During that time, he worked out that Cindy knew about the split. He felt a rush of anger that Susan had gone ahead and told the kids without him. But he was taken aback when Cindy mentioned that she guessed what was going on after spotting a do-it-yourself divorce kit in her mom's room a few days back. She was scared, unsure if Susan would really go through with it until today, when she said she was going to leave the girls at Graham's house for at least the night. As Cindy spoke, he could see how much this mess was hurting her. The pain in her eyes stabbed him deep. Cindy's plea that he keep fighting to be in her life hit him hard, like punches. He knew how to shield those he cared for from harm, but he felt lost when it came to the women in his life. At last, Cindy held his face in her hands, looked into his eyes, and said, "Dad, I know the courts will probably let us stay with Mom, but there's another path. Since she doesn't have a lawyer, we could try a mediator. A pal of mine at school said her folks did that, and now they get along better than before. They even hang out as a family on special days. Please, Dad, I have the mediator's name. Would you consider trying it for us? Please, Dad." He nodded, the weight of her request sinking in. Here was a way, perhaps not easy, but a way, to ease the hurt, to keep them all connected. He promised himself and Cindy he'd look into it. He'd fight not with anger, but for a chance at peace and togetherness. Maybe, just maybe, this could turn things around. 2 weeks after, Jonathan sat at a big table with his new lawyer. The walls had lots of trophies on them. The lawyer saw Jonathan looking and said, "I've won big divorce fights. They even talk about my cases in a law school. I keep those trophies around to show what could go wrong if we don't work together. A while back, I tried to help a couple by myself, but that's risky. They could say I was playing both sides. So now, I do teamwork law. Your wife needs to find a lawyer who knows this way too. Both of you will promise not to fight in court. We'll sit face to face and work out a deal good for both sides. But if one wants to fight in court instead, we both quit, and that person might not look good to the judge." Mark, a big guy, sat back and said, "You're in a strong spot. I know the lawyer you talked to, but she's far away and our local judges don't think like her. Plus, she's had her own trouble. Even with a tough judge here, you might not have to pay support for as long as she said. And about the kids, she's wrong. I know judges here who favor the dad if the mom was unfaithful, no matter the details." He was saying in short that Jonathan had a good chance here, better than he thought, and that they'd work it out together, step by step. In a place like Austin, things might be a bit different. Some judges there don't really fuss over cheating as much as the judges here do. But even in Austin, I can barely think of one, maybe two judges who wouldn't kind of think about cheating when they decide who the kids live with. Even then, what a lot of folks believe about how dads often get a bad deal isn't always how it goes down. Courts know all about the studies showing how key it is for dads to stay in their kids' lives. These studies also point out that when the dad doesn't get to have the kids stay with him at all, he usually ends up fading out of the picture. If the dad really wants to be part of his kids' lives and he hasn't done anything like cheat, drink too much, or be mean, our local courts will likely let him have the kids half the time. This also helps to keep both parents living nearby. Things can get real messy when one parent decides to move to another state. You might be asking why I'm chatting about what might happen in court when we're planning on not even going there. I want you to get that any deal we shake on will be pretty much in the middle of what could either go really well for you or really bad in court. Jonathan took a deep breath and then let it out. I want to take care of my kids, But I don't want to give her a single penny. Is that even possible? No. The only way that's going down is if she's okay with it. That's the whole deal with working together. If you could show that she's totally checked out from the marriage and the kids, you might have a shot with some judges. But she's been at home with the kids. That's been a big help to you and the kids, and that's worth something real when it comes to money. You've told me how you worked hard to make it possible for the house and kids to be her world. What kind of message does it send to your girls if you change that now? Do you want them to think that being a mom at home all day doesn't mean anything money-wise? That's the signal you're sending if you're trying to make Susan feel the pain because she didn't land some high-paying job. Is that really the thing you're aiming to say? Jonathan sighed, a long, heavy sort of sigh. Keeping the kids at home, letting Susan turn their place into a cozy nest, meant a lot to him. He couldn't tell when she started seeing someone else. She claimed it was for a year. But thinking back, the vibe of the home shifted after the kids began school. It lost that warm, safe feeling. He couldn't quite explain it, but he felt it deep down. Something was off. It was as if Susan's heart wasn't in it anymore. Once school started for the kids, she dove into craft lessons and community projects, leaving the nest and their needs behind. Jonathan tried to see it as just another part of life. People change as they grow, he thought. He had hoped she might find a part-time job to ease the workload on him, but deep down he was proud she was finding her place in the world, even if it stung a bit comparing it to their well-to-do neighbors. Facing Mark in his pricey outfit, Jonathan felt out of depth. I'm not much of a talker. That's part of why all this legal stuff gets to me. I'd back myself in a fistfight over fancy talk any day. I'm always lost for words, the kind of guy those card companies keep in mind, he confessed. He spent hours looking for the perfect card for Susan or their daughters for special moments or just to say, I love you, because he couldn't craft those words himself. Locking eyes with his lawyer, a silent understanding passed between them. No tension. Just a quiet exchange. At last, the lawyer's lips curved in a slight smile. I get it. I can play with words all day, but don't ask me to fix a car. I'd be lost without a mechanic. We all have our strengths, and that's what makes a community work. Jonathan nodded, feeling a bit more at ease. They were two sides of the same coin, each playing their part in the bigger picture. Jonathan hadn't really dug deep into what he wanted from the divorce, but then he found a job on an offshore rig near the Gulf Coast. The job was 2 weeks on the rig, then 2 weeks off. Even with so much time off, he'd still earn more than his current job. He thought about getting a part-time job during his weeks off, but only if it meant he could be home when his kids were out of school. He knew kids needed their mom, so he figured splitting their time between him and their mom would be best. Let them live with him for half the time. That felt right. Since he'd be on the rig half the time, he didn't need much to get by. So he thought he could give away 75% of what he made after taxes for his kids. What would be left would be just enough for him to rent a small place, keep up with his car payments, and so on. Would that be fair? He pondered. But he was clear about one thing. He didn't want any of his money going to support Susan, his soon-to-be ex. Mark, his friend, cracked a smile and reminded him that, legally, he'd be on the hook for a maximum of 30% of his earnings for child support and possibly spousal support for up to 3 years. Mark paused, pondered for a moment, then asked, How long do you think you'd stick with the offshore job? Jonathan hadn't really thought that far. Truthfully, he didn't fancy the idea of working off the coast at all. He loved Central Texas, close to his roots and family. However, staying there seemed impossible if he wanted to have any quality time with his daughters. Working in Central Texas meant more overtime, which in turn meant being too drained to spend any meaningful time with his girls. That's why the offshore gig seemed like his best shot. It squeezes over a month's work into just 2 weeks, he explained. But then I'm free for the rest. Plus, the benefits look decent. It might even let me save some cash for the girls' college. After a brief pause, Jonathan's thoughts drifted. He worried about what his daughters might think of him, choosing work over them. That wasn't it at all. He wanted to see them grow, to be there for them. It was clear Jonathan's heart was torn, trying to find the best path forward in the mess of a divorce, all while keeping his daughter's best interests at the front of his mind. You see, Susan would often say that I just sit there, glued to the TV with a beer in hand. But I paid attention, Really, I did. Susan was always chatting about what the girls were into, and it wasn't just us. Cindy and Joey would plop down next to me and spill their hearts out. They shared things with me, things I'd never dream of telling my own folks. I didn't say much back, just listened. Sure, I'd toss in some fatherly advice here and there, but it was clear I was their dad first, pal second. But it was something special, watching their minds tick and seeing them grow up right before my eyes. Cindy would chatter about boys and whatever her friends were up to. I was in the loop, and I'm scared to lose that. Scared to turn into some ghost who only shows up to take them out for a quiet meal. Then Mark asked, "Where will the kids stay?" If you won't let Susan stay in the house and you've only got that small place when you're away working, they can't just be there without someone. I crinkled my brow in thought. I didn't want the kids to lose our home. Truth is, I hadn't thought this through. I just figured I'd lose it all and Susan would take everything. But paying her directly? That I didn't want. I'd happily get the kids gift cards for a nice meal out, yet not a dime for Susan's coffee. I tightened my lips. No way was I funding her stay in the house, but the kids should have it. I'm okay paying for that. But her living there? No way. I glanced down, fists clenched. This is a real mess, huh? Some couples manage to keep the family home shared. Sounds nice, but hardly ever pans out. Though with me gone half the time, maybe it could work for a bit. My stomach did flips and turns. I mean, every time I was there just sitting, it wasn't all silence and sips of beer. The house was full of chatter, laughs, and sometimes those serious heart-to-hearts. Those moments meant the world to me, like I was truly part of their lives, not just some figure passing through. Those sit-downs, those talks, they're what I fear losing the most. It's like watching your very heart grow outside your body, learning, loving, and living. And now, facing all this, I'm scared. Scared of becoming just a memory, a voice over the phone. So amidst all this mess, Mark's question hit me hard. A solution that keeps the kids in their home, keeps me in their lives in some way, it's what I want. But the thought of Susan benefiting from any of it, that twists my guts. Yet isn't it all for the kids? Their smiles, their future, isn't that what's truly at stake here? Maybe, just maybe, there's a way to make this work, to keep the heart of the home beating, even if it means swallowing a bit of pride, a bite of bitterness. Because in the end, it's about them, isn't it? Keeping those talks, those precious moments alive, that's what matters. So, a mess or not, maybe it's a mess worth sorting through for them. It would feel less bad if she could pay half for it, but she can't make that much money. And I really don't want her to bring that jerk there or any other jerk she might find. I just can't wrap my head around her ways. But I also don't want my kids to think it's fine to have two dads at once. Mark checked the money details since they built the house 2 years back. The market went down a bit, and most of the $20,000 they paid off would disappear in the real estate agent's 5% fee. They didn't save any money apart from his retirement plan. If they split up, selling the house would be needed, which would be hard on the kids. If this got to court, there's a big chance Susan would keep the house till the kids were all grown up. Then Jonathan would get half the money when it's sold. Mark saw this happen a lot. This hits hard when one partner stays home. After you break up, you can't control how she lives. But if it's your house, paying for everything, you get to set some rules about what goes on there. What if we find a way to give her cash for her part of what you own? His words faded then. Would you think about letting her stay in the house while you're away working on the rigs? Not charging rent might count as some support, at least until she can get a job and support herself. Jonathan nearly laughed, but it would have been a sad sound. Susan won't get a job. She only wants to be a wife and mom. I wasn't enough, so she found someone else to play wife with. She'll do it again. I shouldn't have to pay for her while she moves in with however many guys need her as their part-time wife. Then Jonathan stopped, hitting on a new way to see Susan. I don't get that way of thinking. I just want one woman. I'd give her all I've got, all of me. Isn't that what we said when we got married? I mean, I don't even smoke. I've got a good job now, and I can't remember the last time I drank too much to worry about getting caught for driving drunk. I don't like to gamble. Sure, I'll put a few dollars on a game, but never more than 5. I don't even buy lottery tickets because the chances of winning are just too low. I don't look at other women, and I've never ever hurt one, especially not Susan. But now, I've been thinking in ways I never did before. It's not just that she slept with another guy. It's that I wasn't enough for her. She wanted more than what I am. That's why she lied. Maybe I'm not the man she needs, but I'm not okay with sharing half of her. It feels like in poker when I put 100 on the table and she only bets 50. She wants both of us. That means she'll always want more. Why would any guy... I stopped myself there, my teeth tightly clenched. My dad taught me better than to speak ill of someone behind their back, much as she might deserve it. Mark was waiting for me to go on, letting the silence hang between us. That trick makes people spill things they didn't mean to say. But when I stayed quiet, he finally spoke. What if in the agreement, you don't have to see Susan? She'd only come over when you're gone and leave before you get back. A spark lit up in my eyes as I asked, could I say she has to stay in the basement? That's where I've been. Can we make sure she doesn't move or change anything? She's always rearranging, buying new things. If it's my house, I don't want her touching my stuff. She'd be like a guest, I mused, the idea taking shape in my mind. This way, I wouldn't have to lose everything familiar, everything that's mine. I needed some part of my life to stay the same amidst all this chaos. This could work, I thought, feeling a strange mix of hope and sorrow. Mark felt a heavy weight on his shoulders. His job was always hard, but this one seemed extra tough. He leaned in, listening to Jonathan's story. Jonathan was pouring his heart out, trying to be as open as he could. Mark could tell. He had met many women who would dream of having a man like Jonathan, a straightforward guy, honest and true. That's what people used to call a plain man, and they meant it as a big compliment. In stories like Jonathan's, Mark felt his old urge to win coming back. He needed to keep that in check. Jonathan was shocked that Susan was hesitating on the divorce. She was the one who wanted it, yet she took ages to even talk to the lawyers Mark suggested. Time kept passing. They finally got to talk face-to-face after more delays. Jonathan had to work away on the oil rigs, feeling more alone than he ever expected. They still hadn't agreed on how to split their stuff or who the kids would live with. Jonathan rented a small room in Austin. He refused to stay in the basement of his own home like some sad creature. He'd visit the house when the kids were back from school and leave after they went to bed. But deep down, Jonathan was full of cold worry, even though he was relieved things were moving forward. Susan was acting so strange, not at all like the woman he thought he knew. Mark had to explain the hard truths about going to trial. The law would probably give her half of everything they owned. But Mark had a plan to avoid paying Susan directly. Jonathan would cover everything for the kids, their food, clothes, health needs. He'd also save up a lot for each of them and would even pay for gifts that Susan chose, as long as they weren't too pricey. This problem was tough, pulling at Mark's heart. He wanted to fix it, to find some way to make it less hard on Jonathan, a man trying his best in a tough spot. It was one of those stories that reminded Mark why he did what he did, despite the emotional toll. Jonathan was ready to give money for any sports team fees or lessons the kids wanted to try. But there were rules to make sure the money wasn't wasted on lessons no one really cared about. For instance, if one of the girls wanted to learn piano, Jonathan wouldn't pay unless she also put in the time to practice. He wouldn't buy a piano until he saw real commitment. In their deal, Jonathan would also give Susan a bit of his 401k, but in exchange he would get full ownership of the house. Susan would have the main say over the kids and would stay in his house. The kids would be there all the time, and he could visit any time he was back from the sea, up to 3 years. For 2 weeks each month when Jonathan was in town, Susan would move to the basement. This space would be fixed up like an apartment with its own door. After 3 years, Susan needed to find her own place, so Jonathan could have his house back every other 2 weeks for 10 years. When little Nancy finished school, Susan's time in the house would end. It wasn't what he really wanted, but his friend Mark had talked him into seeing it as fair, better than what might happen if they fought in court. Even though he didn't say it out loud, Jonathan was pretty sure Susan would find someone else to marry soon. The deal said she couldn't have any man over to the house, not even for dinner. Jonathan felt sure she'd soon meet someone who'd want to marry her. Looking around the room Mark had set up for their meetings, Jonathan was hit by how nice everything was. There were 4 super comfy chairs and a fancy coffee table. Next to each chair, there was a small table on wheels, kind of like the ones in hospitals for eating in bed. The whole place felt like a cozy living room. There was even a gas fireplace to make the vibe warm. Mark's secretary had led them in and was going through all the fancy bits of the room. When Laura, the lawyer for Mark and Susan, walked into the room, both Mark and Susan held a bunch of papers in their hands. Mark spoke up. "Cindy sent these to Laura and me in an email today. I just need to make sure you wrote a book about what got us here." Jonathan glanced at Susan, who had a proud look on her face. "I wrote all this so I would not forget what was said and how I felt during all this mess. I was trying to find a way to say what Jonathan was doing to me. When Cindy caught me writing the other day, she said she'd show it to Jonathan. I wasn't happy about Cindy knowing everything, but I thought maybe this could make Jonathan understand." Laura laughed out loud. "You really told Cindy to send this?" Jonathan saw Susan's eyes flash with anger. "Yes, I did. I took out, well, nearly all the stuff about sex. Only what I thought Jonathan needed to know, to understand this was not about sex." Mark's voice had no color in it. "You didn't talk about your sex life, not much. But you wanted Jonathan to know that for the last 4 years, you were in charge of Rich's house, cleaning, washing dishes, and cooking for him. That you would type papers for him and help him study for his law exams." Susan just shrugged. "Jonathan only ever cared about the sex part when it came to Rich and me. I thought if he knew everything, he might see things clearly." Susan then made Mark and Jonathan look at each other and kept on talking. "I believe if you really read what I wrote and understood how I felt, it might help us fix our marriage. I messed up that first meeting, and I thought if I could just make you read everything, we could make things right." Jonathan was hit hard when he truly understood how long the affair had been going on. As this truth hit him, a deep anger started to grow inside him. Turning to Susan, he said with a harsh tone, "You told me it was just a year, not 4 years you've been—" He was about to say a bad word, but stopped himself because Laura, another woman, was there. Susan's eyes were on fire as she spoke. "4 years? No way. I'm honest. You know that. We were close for just a year. You never cared why or how Rich and I started. You never asked. It was all about you thinking someone else was with your person." Mark glanced at Laura, then cut in. "Let's pause here, just to make sure reading your thoughts didn't bother you." "Nope, I've got nothing to hide. I hoped Jonathan would try and get me, understand my side so we could fix our marriage. If he could only remember his love for me, we can move past this mess. Rich and I are over." She looked at Laura. "We planned for a long talk today, but we need to push it back. Laura and I gotta think this through, especially with the deal we had." Looking at Jonathan, Mark added, "You might want to read this alone, maybe stay away for a bit." Jonathan shook his head. "No, I gotta be there for my girls. Susan can crash somewhere else if Cindy's seen it." "No. I want my home tonight," Susan said, her voice full of hope. She faced the lawyers. "Jonathan's slow. It takes him time. I'll let him read alone." Facing Jonathan, she pleaded, "Will you read it? Really try to understand? It would mean everything. I don't want us to end. I still love you. You're my soulmate, father of my girls, the one I want to grow old with. I had to file because of how it was affecting the girls. Their needs come first." Jonathan looked at her, trying hard to get who this person he married was. Did she always think so little of him? He couldn't find the right words to show how he felt, so he just nodded. "I'll read it tonight." Susan's face lit up with joy as she looked at Jonathan. "Daddy, I made sure Mom sent it to Mr. Mark because I want to stay with you. I thought you should see what Mom has been up to." She lowered her voice as if sharing a secret. "I didn't tell anyone about the gun. Finding it loaded again scared me a lot. I hid it, and I was so glad you never asked about it. You can't let anyone know. They'll say you're not okay, and they'll use that to keep us apart." Jonathan blinked so hard he thought the whole street could hear his eyes open. Little Cindy was the reason his gun didn't work. She knew. How did she know when he hadn't even thought it might happen once he had time to think about what he nearly did? It hit him deep inside, just feeling so lost and thinking his kids would be better off without him. He was so down and had no one to turn to. Yet he couldn't let his daughter see his moment of weakness. The weight of what he nearly did was his to bear. His mind was racing. He wouldn't lie, but what could he say? I wondered where the bullets went. The gun wouldn't be much use in a break-in if it wasn't loaded. Cindy kept quiet, but she seemed calmer as she walked away. Jonathan sat on the bed, thinking over what Susan had written for the last 16 years. Susan was his safe place, where he thought he could show his soft side. Sure, she would guard it while he faced the world. Sure, she would stand by him as he always stood by her. Having read Susan's story, he was speechless. First, he had no clue she was such a good writer, and second, he couldn't believe how he had thought he really knew her. Mark had always stressed how key it was to talk things out for working together in a split. He had spent many hours asking Jonathan the right questions to get all his wishes and needs out for the lawyer to know. Yet Susan's story seemed to come out easy. Why hadn't she shared her feelings or wants with him before? Maybe she knew deep down how much he would dislike it. As Jonathan looked around Mark's meeting room again, he noticed things he hadn't seen before. Mark had really done his best to make the room feel cozy and classy, like someone's own space. The room gave off a vibe of quiet, stylish comfort. It felt like the kind of place where you had to behave well. Yes, it was as if the room itself told you to mind your manners like you would if a very important guest was coming over. Jonathan thought this had to be on purpose. In a room like this, people would think twice before raising their voices at each other. He sensed this calm as Susan walked in with her lawyer, looking as lovely as ever. It was hard to believe appearances could be so misleading. Today, the chairs were set up differently. He and Susan were sitting across from each other, with the warmth of the fireplace on his right. This time, both lawyers sat down at the head of the coffee table, facing the fireplace. Jonathan waited for Mark to start, feeling more prepared after spending extra hours with him for this, their second meeting together. Mark nodded at both Jonathan and Susan. Laura and I talked for more than an hour, as we've let you know. This collaborative way lets me see Susan not as someone I'd argue against in court, but as a person we're trying to help together. I can see Laura as a team member, not someone to outdo in this. We're not here to fight over every little thing, but to find a solution. Mark's words were meant to comfort and assure, stressing teamwork and a shared goal over conflict. This approach aimed to ease the tension and encourage a peaceful resolution, focusing on mutual understanding and cooperation rather than winning a battle. In a world where breaking up can turn bitter fast, there's a way to do it with less hurt. I've seen it work wonders. Most folks think they'll have to give up more than they do and end up getting more than they hoped for. I often find myself stopping my clients from saying yes to less than what a judge might say they should get. I fight to make sure they're treated right. Mark looked at Laura. Laura nodded. Me too. And the kids? They're better off in the long run with this way than if their parents fought it out in court. When a couple can part ways like this, they manage to work together better when kid troubles pop up. And those troubles will come, no matter how well you think you've planned. We help our clients get ready to talk things through from the start. I use what I know about how things usually go in court to help my clients be fair in what they ask for. Mark and I have been talking over your split since you both chose to do it this new way. But often there's a fight over something small, something that means a lot but isn't worth much money. Most times the couple will say yes to what their lawyers think is fair. But then Susan's diary changed everything. She wanted Jonathan to read it, and that's a game changer. Mark turned to Susan. Any good lawyer could use this diary to turn the tables on what you might get. Laura and I had figured out what a judge might decide. Usually we'd take that and help you both come to an agreement, but now, with the diary out in the open, Laura says she'll have to step back. In this tale of parting ways, emotions run high as a simple diary threatens to unravel what could have been a peaceful end to a shared journey. The once harmonious path now seems strewn with obstacles, each page of the diary a step away from the amicable resolution they'd hoped for. Both of them are telling you to take what they've worked out without any changes. Laura will find another lawyer in her firm to help Susan if you want to change a lot of what's been done. But Susan needs to know, getting a new lawyer means starting over, and it's going to cost a lot. If you agree to what we've got, it'll save you both a bunch of money. Laura tried to cut in. But why are we still talking about splitting up? She looked at Jonathan. Didn't you get what I wrote? Didn't you see how much I love you? You said you loved me. Didn't that mean anything? I remember when you loved me before Rich got in the way. Can't we use that love to make everything better again? Didn't you realize I was upset that night when I said those mean things? I'm so sorry I got mad. But didn't you get why I said sorry? Please, Jonathan, for our girls, I'll wait for you to change, to become the man I believe you can be, to do what's needed so the girls don't get hurt anymore. Jonathan was stuck. How could he make her see? They weren't even talking the same way. How could two people who had been together for so long not understand each other? They used the same words, but they meant different things. Jonathan knew what words like love meant to him, but he couldn't get what they meant to her. Trying one more time, Jonathan looked at Susan. I thought I was in a happy marriage for 15 years. I loved my wife, and I thought she loved me. I gave her all of me. My heart, my soul, my fears, and my dreams. I was the happiest man in the world, having a wife to love and stand by. Susan, you were there with me for 15 years, but you were never really my wife. I just didn't see it. You might look like the woman I thought was my wife, but you were never the one I loved. I don't hate you, but I sure don't like how you made me lose my time by faking to be someone else. I don't hate you, but I don't like you either. Seeing you just makes me think of the wife I never got to keep. I loved her, truly did. And even though I love her so much, I can't help but feel upset at you for acting like her. Mark gently tapped his arm. Jonathan, why don't you head to my office? Jonathan glanced at Susan, shook his head softly, and walked to Mark's office without making a sound. Once Jonathan was out of sight, Laura fixed her eyes on Susan like she was a bug stuck on sticky paper. You need to know why I can't keep being your lawyer. My feelings are getting in the way. The deal I got you is way better than what any judge would give you, even on his best day. I think you should sign it now before it's gone. This is the last advice I'll give you as your lawyer. I'm about to ask Mark to step out because I'm not your lawyer anymore, but I want to talk to you, woman to woman. I want Mark to hear you say you're okay with staying and listening to what I have to say. I want to be very clear that nothing I'm going to say is meant as legal advice, even if we end up talking about your split. If you both agree, some things I want to say to you in private might help, even if they're just for me to feel better. We've made sure nothing said here can be used in court. Do you agree? Susan nodded, and after Mark had left the office, she faced Laura. She tried hard to keep her voice steady to hide her anger. You're a woman. Can't you understand my side? Can't you help us get back together? Maybe suggest a good couples therapist? Laura let out a big sigh. You're the only one in this whole mess who thinks staying married is a good idea. Your kids think so too. Even little Nancy told me that. I can't believe Daddy has to sleep in the cold basement because Mommy's got a new guy. Laura stared down Susan with a look so sharp it once made a grown man wet himself in court. You should take the deal we're offering, she said with a firm voice. Jonathan's being way too kind. If I were in his shoes, you'd be in trouble. Judge Judy Martin, who started the local women's group, she'd make sure Jonathan got everything. You'd lose your clothes and be paying him money every month for taking care of you all these years, even if you were left with nothing but a box to live in. Susan's face dropped. No woman could do that to me. I've been there for Judy. Now I can do it to you. I believe in fair play. I get mad when people say we don't care about what's done, just why it's done. What really gets me is when they can point to someone like you. Look at what you're doing. Women like you hurt the fight for women's rights. You never tried to stand on your own, not even when the kids were at school. I respect moms who stay home to raise their kids. That's a big job, but that's not you. You didn't work to help out, volunteer, or make things better for your kids. No. You just found another man to take care of you. That makes you the worst kind of housewife. You keep saying you're strong. Strong women do big things. Laura's gaze was fierce. You keep saying you want Jonathan to be strong enough to take you as you are, but have you ever really taken him as he is? The way he shows his love? She read from the journal with a heated voice. Deep down, I felt it. He never loved me enough to ask why. Why didn't matter to him? Only being with someone else did. Did he ever love me, or just like having me around? Was I now just something he lost to another? Was that the only thing that mattered to him? I cried myself to sleep feeling he never loved me, never could. I knew deep inside that's why I let myself get close to Rich, because Jonathan never really loved me. We didn't marry for love. It was just convenient for him. He never showed me real love. Laura looked from the paper. So you think because he got mad about the affair it means he never loved you? Is that it? Susan sighed, nodding. That's how I felt. Laura's look was full of disbelief. How can you not see it? You said Jonathan isn't a talker. Did he say, I love you out of bed? Yeah, but not much. It felt like he just said it because he thought he had to. He didn't talk about love like Rich did. Rich could make me feel wanted with just his words. Did Rich ever help with the bills? No, he didn't need to. He loved me. He wasn't about the money. Susan defended. So you cheated because Jonathan didn't talk sweet nothings like Rich, and when he was hurt, you decided his love wasn't real. Laura was astounded. You need to really think about what love is. It's not just words or feeling wanted, it's actions, support, being there. Did you ever think about that? Susan sat quietly, reflecting. Laura's words hit deep. Maybe she hadn't seen the ways Jonathan showed love, in his actions rather than words. And maybe she was too quick to find what she thought was missing with someone else. Deep down, she knew she needed to understand love was more than just wanting to hear the right things. I had a big talk with Jonathan about his words. Laura's face stayed hard, like she heard it all before. So I changed my question. Apart from talking sweet and being close, how did Rich show his love? Did he surprise you with small gifts? Or take you out to nice spots? Susan just let out a sigh. I know he wanted to, but we had to be careful. Couldn't let Jonathan get a hint of a gift or hear about us being out. He might get the wrong idea, and I was right. Jonathan didn't care enough to even ask me why. If he had asked you, I pressed on, you might have pointed out where he slipped up, how your other man topped him. But Susan cut in. No, it wasn't really about being better, just different. She took a moment. Rich gave me what Jonathan couldn't. They were just not the same guy. Rich seemed stronger somehow. Laura jumped back into our talk. Sounds like you're saying no. Susan dragged out no like we were missing her point. Jonathan just didn't get me like Rich did, didn't put in the effort. From what I recall, his days were just fishing, TV, and beer. He'd let himself go. Right, Susan nodded, puzzled by Laura's tone. He got heavier, got boring, hardly talked. Didn't care how I felt, guess working hard to pay for our big house had nothing to do with it. I shook my head. But what about you? Did you try to see what his life was like, care for him? I remember he'd take lunch to save money. Did you make those for him? Sometimes. Mornings were crazy trying to get everyone ready. Laura shook her head, then said more. You cooked a lot, right? Did you watch what he ate? Try to get him to move more? I remember you didn't like that he didn't want to go out like you did. Did you try to find things to do that just involved talking to you both? You're good at making plans, better than Jonathan. Did you lead in making plans, or were you too busy doing house chores for Rich? Susan felt a sting. Laura sounded mad. If he loved me, he should have put me first, Susan shot back. Doesn't that mean you should have put him first too? Can you think of any time you did? Do you think leaving him to be with Rich after saying such mean things about his lovemaking was putting him first? You broke him, took apart his whole world, and then you thought he should still support you. It's like you were stressing him out and then saying it was hard on you instead of him. He said a bad word, not like him. Susan spoke softly. I know I didn't do right that night, but it's not as bad as you say. But even after, all you regretted was losing your temper, not that you hurt him. You just wished you could have made him see you as the victim in the mess you made. Susan got tense. I'm strong. I can't let him push me around. But then she saw Laura's face get hot with anger. For a moment she thought Laura might explode. Then, in a calm but scary voice, Laura kept going. This is a tough rewrite that keeps the essence but simplifies the language, tones down the complexity, and maintains an emotional charge, while also extending the content slightly to match the original request. Do you think I'm tough? I've won more cases than almost any lawyer around here. I got voted in as a judge 3 times before I hung up my robe. I have 2 amazing kids and 3, soon to be 4, wonderful grandkids. What do you say? Right. I guessed you saw me as strong when you eyed those photos of me with well-known folks on my wall. Thanks. I always saw myself as tough. Hearing you say it means the world to me. Weak women aren't my kind. Susan looked upset, but Laura's voice got hard, then it softened. I've been with my husband for nearly 38 years. When we tied the knot, he was flying planes, making a lot of cash. And there I was, fresh from law school, buried in debt. We got hitched, chose to have our kids before I launched my career. Jim set a tight budget for us. Then, when our youngest went to school and I landed a solid job, the money started to flow. But then, bang, crisis hit. A drunk driver slammed into Jim. He couldn't fly anymore, decided he'd teach kids instead, hoping to lift them up in a different way. So guess what happened to our budget now that I earned more and Jim earned way less? I took over, right? Power was mine? No, nothing shifted. I was still no good with money. It slipped through my fingers like water. Jim hated dealing with numbers, too. He grew up watching his mom handle the cash. But we stuck together. When one fell short, the other stepped up. Jim didn't handle our finances to boss me around, but so we could give to things we cared about. This story isn't just about a tough woman. It's about teamwork, stepping up where needed, and sticking together through thick and thin. Showing real strength isn't just about winning cases or being famous, but also about how you face life's unexpected turns together. That's how true partners act. Let me paint you another picture. Jim is top-notch behind the wheel. He's got quick reactions like a fighter pilot, can see deep and wide. He's never hit another car, but his driving style is like he's in a jet. So whenever we need to go somewhere together, I take the wheel. I'm not the driver he is, but me driving doesn't freak him out like his driving does to me. The first time I heard his pilot buddies making fun of him for letting his wife drive, I was so mad I could scream, but it didn't shake him one bit. He could take the teasing because me feeling safe meant more to him. We're both strong individually. We don't waste time fighting over what people think our roles should be, old stereotypes or new ones. My goodness, did you really know your man? What kind of guy did you think you were marrying? I've seen your diary, and honestly, I don't think I've ever seen the guy you described. I expect my husband to see me as his equal. If he didn't, I'd be furious. Laura came closer, her voice dropped to emphasize her point. And I look at him the same way. To me, he's not above or below me. When I hear about some feminists who think women should be above men, it makes my blood boil. Jim and I, we're not the same, but that doesn't mean one is better than the other. It's like we're a work of art split in two. If you cut that picture right down the middle, no way it'd stick together, but we're more like puzzle pieces. Where I've got gaps, he's got bits that stick out. Our strengths and flaws mesh perfectly. I give him what he needs without keeping score. Without him, my world, my picture, is just not complete. Once upon a time, there was a lady named Susan and a man named Jonathan. They had a tale that was full of twists and turns, not all of them good. This isn't a tale about laws or advice. It's a tale from heart to heart. You see, Jonathan gave his all to Susan. He gave her his heart, his time, his very soul. But when I looked through Susan's words, I couldn't find where she gave back. It was all take, take, take. She was so caught up in what Jonathan wasn't giving her, yet she didn't even give him her full love. She kept her passion locked away, a passion she freely gave to another named Rich, but not to Jonathan. She didn't give Jonathan the support he needed, the kind that binds two hearts together in tough times. Instead of helping by getting a job, so Jonathan didn't have to break his back for their life, she found comfort in another's arms, giving away what was meant for Jonathan. It's hard to hear, but this is a heart talking to another heart. Jonathan was almost last on her list. First came herself, maybe her kids after that, and Rich before Jonathan. If Susan has any goodness in her soul, she would try to make things right, to heal the pain she's caused. But how? Susan asked. He's closed off to me, and this mess is hurting our little ones. If you were Jonathan, would you want someone like yourself around? Then the story moves to Jonathan, who found himself talking to Mark, a wise man who helped folks untangle their messy lives. Mark couldn't hide his disbelief. Why did you ever choose her? He wondered. He wasn't looking for an answer. Susan's words had hit him hard. He started in family law wanting to fix things, but sometimes it felt like he was making more messes, especially in battles where children were the unseen victims. His role, as he saw it, wasn't just about fighting, it was about defending, about finding a path that didn't lead to more hurt. This tale isn't just about Susan and Jonathan. It's about making choices, about giving and taking, about how love needs to be a two-way street, especially when little ones are watching, learning. In the end, it's a tale about trying to mend what's broken, not with grand gestures, but with small steps toward understanding, toward healing. For a long time now, my job has been to help folks figure out what's best for everyone in the long haul. Trying to grab every last penny from a divorce just makes things messy. I learned that the hard way. When one side feels cheated, they keep coming back, fighting over and over until the only winners are the lawyers. That's the game the courts play. But I saw how it was tearing good folks apart, turning them mean. That's not what my church says is right, and it was eating me up inside. So now, I work to get the fairest breakup we can, even if it means my client might not get as much as they could have. I've been at this for close to 10 years, and I'm proud that only 3 couples had to go back to court after working with me. And those deals we made, they held up every time. Jonathan was puzzled. What does this mean for him, especially now that her lawyer is stepping away? Jonathan tensed up, ready to defend himself as he saw Mark's smile turn sharp. It wasn't really a smile, it was a warning. Mark's teeth looked downright scary. Mark started to explain. Once Laura is done talking to her, she'll probably feel awful, but I doubt she'll drag things out or take it to court. Mark's talking straight with her, laying out the hard truths. I do wish I could stand up for you in court if she's foolish enough to take it there. Mark took a deep breath, and Jonathan saw the fighter in him calm down, tucked away behind his polished look. After a moment, Mark went on. I read somewhere that Plains Indians showed respect to their captives by letting them show their courage, even as they faced death by torture. Mark looked at Jonathan, his face serious. You know, if an enemy fought well, they'd honor him even in his death. They'd sing of his brave fights. What I wish I could do to your wife, well, it'd make those old wars look kind. But deep down, I'm guessing you've got even darker thoughts. Mark let out a breath, almost a laugh, but not quite. But doing that, feeling that rush, it wouldn't last. You've got 3 kids forever, he continued. That ties you to her. Even when the kids are all grown up, she won't just disappear. If you push her out, the kids might go too. Mark raised his hand to stop Jonathan before he could speak. Right now, they might pick you, but that will change. They don't see her like we do. To them, she's not a monster. They'll miss her, want her around for the big moments, the real big ones. Imagine when grandkids come into the picture. Mark paused. We've got to find a way to accept what we can't change. Jonathan felt a storm building inside him. His heart raced, muscles tightened, and part of him wanted to lash out, but Mark's next words stopped him cold. Imagine if you saw a guy, a knife in hand, going after one of your daughters. What would you do? Jonathan could almost see it. His blood ran cold. I'd stop him, he said without a moment's doubt. Even knowing I'd get hurt? Mark pressed. I'd have to be smart. Dying won't help her. But I'd do anything to give her a chance to escape. Mark nodded, understanding. You're saying you'd fight no matter what. That's what any real dad would do. It's what drives men to stand up, to protect their loved ones. It's why men go to war, to put themselves between danger and their family. Mark's voice was solemn. Right now, your family's in a kind of war. Jonathan felt the weight of Mark's words. They sparked something in him, a deep, protective pull. This wasn't just about battles or standing up to foes. It was about guarding what was most precious, even when faced with the hardest choices. Jonathan clenched his jaws so tight he lost a tooth filling. He spat it out and clenched tighter. His arms and legs turned to steel, full of anger needing to burst out. His eyes burned with fury, but he didn't lose his mind to blind rage. Real men know there's more ways to fight than just throwing punches. Jonathan was no genius, but he had enough brains to see this wasn't a dead end. He could bash through with physical force or sheer will. For a solid 3 minutes, he let his wild side scream against the unfair ways of the world. When he calmed down, he gave Mark a small nod. Mark's eyes popped in surprise, but he managed a tight smile back, a nod between fighters. One thing I cherish about being a Christian is, it reminds me there's still too much evil out there. The bad guys are evil women, they seem to dodge karma. I hold on to that verse in Romans, vengeance is mine, I will repay, says the Lord. It's like a pact between him and me, helps me sleep at night. Here's where you stand. You could go after what you want, hammer and tongs, but that won't stick. It won't be long before Susan finds some rich guy to drag you through the mud in court again. If she thinks she hasn't beaten you in the split, we'll play it smart. We make it look like she's won. But you'll hold the reins. We get you full custody, but let her see the kids when she wants. You get the house, but she can stay as if she's just looking after it while you're off working. We'll set her up with a small place for when you're back. That stands until she finds herself a new man or 2 years pass. Then she's got to fend for herself, and you can kick her out of your life for good. I guess you don't plan to work far from home for more than 2 years. Of course, she'll still get to see the kids all she wants. Jonathan smiled. Doing the right thing for my kids is tough, but I think this pain will pass quick. That woman will find someone new in no time. A week later, Susan made her way to Rich's new place in Hillsborough. Despite the heavy trucks on the road, the 2-hour drive up I-35 gave her time to think for the first time since her chat with Laura. She was still in shock, amazed at how quickly everything had unfolded since then. She had signed the final deal without any changes 2 days ago, and now they were just waiting for the courts to confirm it. The girls were staying the next 2 weeks with Jonathan until he headed out to the offshore rig. From what Laura had said, the deal seemed more than fair. Her biggest worry was that, although she had a roof over her head, she needed to find work to afford food, clothes, and the small things. That required more cash than the job she was finding. Realizing that her life with Jonathan was truly over, Susan felt she should turn to Rich when she met him at his door. He seemed more held back than she expected, but she pushed into his arms. She said, "I really need you. It's over. Jonathan and I are done. I love him, and I guess I always will. I wanted to grow old with him, but maybe it's for the better. He never got me the way you do. We need a plan. I let Jonathan have our house and the kids. I know you've not been here long, but we need to move back to be closer to the girls, even when Jonathan's around. I know. I said I'd never leave Jonathan, but I thought he'd love me enough to stay." After a quick hug, Rich let go of her, and she saw a look on his face she'd never seen before. Worried. Susan went on, "What's wrong, Rich? We've talked about being together for so long." In this new take, the journey of Susan's emotional turmoil and her leap towards a new chapter with Rich unfolds with simpler words and varied sentence lengths, aiming to convey strong emotions while sticking to the essence of the story. "When we last talked, you wanted me to fix things with my family. I tried. I really did. Now, we have to deal with what comes next. If Jonathan doesn't follow the deal, we can take him to court." Rich was shocked. He had never seen her so speechless. After a quiet moment, she finally said, "You keep surprising me with what you expect. But you got it wrong. We broke up, Susan, remember?" Susan let her head drop, giving Rich a look like when the kids don't get something but still look cute. "We only broke up because you wanted my family whole again. That's what I said. To avoid a bigger argument." "Goodness, Susan, you talk a lot about being kind, but you're not, are you, Rich? Really, you don't see how I change." "That night when you came over after talking to Jonathan, I was shocked by what you had done to him. It was like waking up, seeing myself clearly. When I told you how harsh you were, all you did was complain about the names he called you. Hearing you, you said you wouldn't tolerate a cheating partner. It made me wonder why I would want one. Every day I wish I could have saved my wife from that crash. I wish it were me instead of her. She was my better half. She would never have cheated on me. Thinking about how I loved her and what I felt for you, it wasn't the same. In that moment, I understood Jonathan. I imagined how I'd feel if my wife were with another man, especially with what you did to Jonathan with me. But it wasn't really cheating with him. I mean, what we had was more than just sex. You needed me, and sure, I needed you too. I was weak, down in the dumps. Instead of standing tall and facing life, I hid behind you. I let you spin a world all about you. That was my whole life for 4 years. The one thing that doesn't make me feel sick is thinking about going back to law school." Rich laughed a harsh laugh. "Yeah, you loved me. You loved a scared weakling, a man close to giving up who had no backbone. I was the type who only cared about getting close to a woman who wasn't his type, way too old for him. The sort who thought about ways to trick a good man. We talked about love. But did you notice? In all those 4 years, your kids never got to meet me? Did you see that for 3 years, even before we got close, you never told your friends or family about me? Why do you think that was? Maybe you were too ashamed of what we were doing to good people, scared they might not get it. If I had been thinking straight, I would have been turned off too." Holding her arms, keeping her away like a naughty kid, Rich looked right into Susan's eyes. "I learned a lot from Jonathan. I looked down on him. I thought he was a man who couldn't keep his wife in check. I saw him as weak for choosing to stay out of sight, while he knew his wife was with someone she thought was better. When you said he stopped being close to you, I saw the light. I saw how brave and noble Jonathan was. We told him he'd lose it all in a split. So in a way, he split from you but stayed under the same roof. We threw a heap of trash on him and he managed to warm his home with it. When he lost his wife in a way more painful than I lost mine. He chose to work less and spend more time with his kids. He didn't drown in drink or lose himself in meds like I had for years. He just rolled up his sleeves and did the work to make a good life for his family with his own hands. I never felt so low. Do you know why I'm still here talking to you? It's because of what I learned from a man I never got to meet face to face. I will take up my duty and do what I must. I don't want anything to do with a woman like you. But I owe your husband for my wrongs. I had fun. I had my joy. But I didn't face the cost. Letting her go, Rich stepped away. Jonathan covered your stay. I was using you. I owe Jonathan and I'm set to make it right. He'd never take my money. So here's my plan. No man should have to keep an ex-wife in his home. I'll use some of my insurance money to get a place near his. It will be big and nice for the girls and you. You can stay there for free until little Nancy is all grown or you get married. Maybe then Jonathan won't have to work away. Maybe he can find work here to stay with his kids all the time. That's the best I can do for him. Heck, I'll even throw in a little cash for your needs. Jonathan covered those too while I was using you. And since I did get something out of us being together, I'll pay for your schooling, even college. By paying a lot for what I took from you, maybe I can get back some dignity. Only one thing you gotta do. All talks between us go through my lawyer. If you ever reach out to me by mail, phone, email, or face-to-face, the money's gone. Jonathan was at the grocery store in the card aisle. Cindy was about to be 16, and Jonathan was looking for a card that could say what he felt. He'd seen lots of pretty cards with touching words. He just hadn't found one yet. One that said, "Okay, you're about to start driving and dating. I'm happy to see you grow up. I care for you a lot, and I trust you. But if you get hurt, it'll tear me apart. So please don't. How can this huge wall full of cards not have the one I'm looking for?" Jonathan thought he'd been here for an hour already and guessed he'd be stuck for another hour, half reading cards. He noticed a young woman checking out sympathy cards. She wasn't crying, but it was clear she was really upset. It made Jonathan feel uneasy. He always wanted to ease someone's pain when he saw it. She kind of looked like someone he knew, and he tried to think of what to say that might help. Even 2 years after his divorce, he wasn't interested in getting close to another woman. But he felt it had made him more aware of when others were hurting. He wished he knew how to offer comfort and sympathy without sending the wrong message. He sighed. Being bad at giving sympathy wasn't a reason to do nothing. He walked over and cleared his throat. "I'm sorry for your loss. I'll pray for your family." Then he quickly moved back to his section. He hoped she wouldn't think he was trying to flirt or be too nosy. "Hey, Jonathan, how have you been? How are the girls? It's Cindy's birthday, right?" The woman gave him a small smile. Jonathan was good at remembering people, and it bothered him he couldn't recall someone who knew him this well. This was even more awkward than he thought. She stopped, then said, "Don't feel bad you don't remember me. We only met a few times in person. But I worked a lot on your divorce case. I'm Janice. I was Laura's assistant. I didn't stay there long. I wanted to learn about the teamwork in law before I went back to law school. So I took the job there while I was waiting for classes to start." Jonathan felt a lump in his throat. "Is there anything I can do to help? I don't want to interfere, but still trying to be the hero, huh? Don't be upset. I mean that in a nice way." He wanted to show he cared, but was clumsy about it, like a knight trying to save someone but stumbling over his own feet. Yet his heart was in the right place. That's what I called my man to his birthday, the same day as Cindy's. That's how I keep it in mind. I'm on the hunt for something for Mom. His mom? We're still really tight. I hit every family get-together, and I've made a vow I always will. Lance was taken in Afghanistan, about a year before I bumped into you. I'm sorry. I bet he was one of a kind. The best ones, always too young. It stings." Her look got soft, and Jonathan saw something deep in her eyes like she was checking him out. Then she whispered, "Yeah, the good ones. They leave us young. And it's tough finding true men nowadays, men who aren't scared of being real men. Mom." Nancy showed off her skills with words, stretching that word out long. "Is there a rule that bridesmaids' dresses have to look this bad? I swear when it's my turn, my bridesmaids will shine, she moaned, diving onto her bed. Do I have to show up at this wedding? Can't we have a crisis? I can't stand it. I won't have that talk in our home. A wedding's a time for joy. You will not spoil this day. Got it? But Dad, drawing the word out just as long. This is round 3 of me being her bridesmaid since you two said I do, 9 years back. Guess I should be glad. I'm out of the flower girl game. Noticing her dad's gaze, she turned a bit red. She wouldn't have let loose if she knew her dad was listening. She got up and went over to Janice, hoping her dad would take the hint and leave. Janice bent down to jot it down to show him later. John, we got this in the bag. It's the bridesmaid's holy duty to moan about her dress. She wasn't ignoring your no trash talking Susan rule, just wedding jitters. Remember your own twitches when Cindy was getting hitched? That's the thing, Dad. It's all about the dress. As Jonathan walked away, Nancy looked at her stepmom with a cheeky grin. When Janice calmed down, Nancy joked, Should I get on a chair next time you bend down? I'm kind of scared my brother will just jump out. Janice touched her tummy and smiled. Having the first kid is tough, she said, her eyes getting a faraway look. I really hope your mom finds what she had with your dad. Nancy held Janice's hands. Dad was so lucky when he found you. We all were. You've shown us what a strong woman looks like by always being there for him. Dad isn't great with words, but I see the way he looks at you. He thinks you're his dream woman. Nancy paused, biting her lip before she asked, Look, I love my dad, and I think he's the best. But you're this amazing lawyer with all those awards making more money than Dad. I bet some of your friends think you married someone beneath you, said Nancy. Janice's eyes sparkled. They wouldn't be my friends if they thought that. Look, the smartness or talents we're born with, those are gifts from God, not things we earned. And the world decides what those gifts are worth, which isn't always fair. Why do singers get more money than teachers? We should really judge a person by what they do with their gifts. Your dad is the best mechanic, hands down. He got there through his character, his heart, and hard work. Be strong enough to not settle. If you can have the best in one area, go for it. It doesn't matter if it's the best judge or the best cleaner. Being the best is always special. And don't be too quick to judge who makes more money. People will pay top dollar for the best. Plus, if you're the best at flipping burgers, you might just end up owning a bunch of places. Janice's words filled the room with warmth. Nancy felt a mix of pride and awe for both her dad and Janice. This was a family knitted together not by blood but by love and respect for each other's strengths and journeys. It was a lesson on valuing people not just for what they had, but for who they were at heart. Looking at your dad, you see how his own shop has changed things. A good, honest car fixer can earn a lot. People will find him wherever he is. I'm really blessed to have your dad. All I wanted was to be a great wife and mom. Lowering her voice, she shared, You girls were amazing. It was easy. But having a baby boy makes me a bit scared. I have to start all over. Nancy tried to clear the catch in her throat, then went on in a lighter voice. Dad's one of a kind. Okay, Cindy's lucky too. But men like Dad are rare now. I get it. I've been through my fair share of the wrong guys. Janice replied with a soft smile. You're fortunate. You know how to spot a good man because of Dad. It's tough sometimes. Spotting a real hero from a loudmouth or a bully takes time, but if you're patient, you'll find the right one. Your dad showed me his true colors during his divorce with your mom. I knew he'd need time, but I waited. The good ones are worth waiting for. I didn't think I'd meet him while picking out a card, but he lifted my spirits right there. That moment felt right. Nancy's tone became serious again. It's strange, isn't it? If Dad hadn't been so decent through his divorce, he wouldn't have had you, right? I guess some good men my age just need a bit more time to mature. But you've shown me they deserve the wait. I'm so glad to have you in my life. You're teaching me how to be the woman a strong man would need. I love you, Mom. Nancy rested her hand on Janice's belly, feeling the baby move. Don't worry about him. You're the world's best mom until it's my turn. With a big kick from the belly, both women smiled. I love you. Hey, listeners, if you enjoyed watching this video and want to stay updated with our latest content, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. You won't want to miss out on what's coming next. Thanks for watching and see you in the next video with Queen Cheating Tales.